Hey everyone, welcome back to John's Watch. Today I'm taking a look at a new game called Goldenheart. This game was released on Steam on November 19th, 2024. Its regular price is $12.99 Canadian or your regional equivalent, and it's developed by Millenniapede and published by MAVC. This is a real throwback adventure game. The screenshots made me think of Morrowind a lot. Gameplay-wise, it's not dissimilar to Morrowind, but it's a lot more, or it's a bit more linear than Morrowind. Morrowind was obviously very open world, but this is kind of like a Morrowind-inspired, and other games-inspired, old-school RPG. The Steam description says you've entered a foreign land in the course of an expedition and become involved in an otherworldly mystery. Tildenorria is a deceptively simple world balanced delicately between the extreme forces of a magical universe. And then further down on the Steam page it says that this is an old-school style linear fantasy adventure game created by two people. It's very impressive for being done by two people. I feel like the graphics, aesthetic, they nailed that throwback style. I think that is one of the main reasons why like Morrowind is the first game that I and plenty of other people think of when they see this game. You know, it looks like a, you know, maybe late 90s, early 2000s video game. It doesn't specifically say on the store page, but I believe it's got to be inspired by, you know, some like First Nations, Native American cultures, I've got to assume, because there's so much of that kind of style in the game, in the villagers, or sorry, in the villages, and in the people you talk to, and some of the creatures that you fight, some of the bosses, I've got to assume are inspired by something like that. You play as an outsider. You are part of this traveling group who are looking for safety, basically, and when you start the game, you're just in your camp. You can talk to all your fellow travelers there, and you're very quickly armed with some very makeshift weapons. You're given, I think it's a wok as your shield, and just a machete, an old machete that was kind of in the camp supplies as your weapon. And you're basically sent off to find somebody who'd gone ahead. And then, bam, you're outside of the camp, and you're kind of thrown into it, and you're ready to explore and engage in combat. You're also given a bow and arrow. Sorry, I should have said that as well. Before you start up the game, I was going to say it encourages you to do a tutorial. I think it actually requires you to do the tutorial. I think the start game option is disabled until you've completed the tutorial, which just teaches you about toggling sprint on and off, and locking onto enemies when you're in combat, and the melee and ranged combat. Fairly simple systems, but still a nice, a very quick tutorial, so it's fine. And once you get out into the world, like I said, you get into the first combat, and as soon as I got into the first bit of combat, I was like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to play this game for very long, because the very first enemy you fight is a big spider, a big jumping spider. And if people don't know, I'm not good with pretty much any insects. Spiders are the worst for me, but like no insects do I like. And so, you know, like the first enemy was a big spider that jumps at you, and I was like, I'm not sure about this. And then I think the next enemy was like a big hornet that flies at you and like gets right in your face. And I think like the second one I fought like must have got me from behind or something, because like it made me jump so bad. I was like, I'm gonna play like 10 minutes of this and I'm gonna have to give up. But I found there's something quite engaging, compelling about this game, and even though I was expecting to give it up pretty quickly, and I did want to at the start, I kind of toughed it out. And at the time of recording, I've played 2.3 hours, and that's probably where I'm gonna leave it, but I think that's probably about 30% of the way through it. I've been going pretty quickly, but I think most of the Steam reviews that seem to have beaten the game are about the 12-hour mark, which again, when you consider the price of $12.99 Canadian, is quite a bargain actually, if this kind of game is for you. When it says that it's an old school style fantasy adventure game, it means it. It does not hold your hand at all. You have to read dialogue and talk to people to figure out what you're supposed to do. Some of the dialogue is more direct than you'd expect. There was one point where, kind of at the end of the prologue area, I'd say, You meet someone in a cabin on top of the mountain, and she tells you to go down to down the other side of the mountain to a village. And when you get to the village, somebody there advises you to go north from the village, because from the village you can go 4 different directions. And so if you go north from the village, you can do kind of that area, I guess. It loads you into a new area, and once you complete that area, you go back to the village, and by the time you get back to the village, your traveling group has managed to catch up to you, and they've arrived at the village. And then I think it's the leader of your troop says, oh, the person on top of the mountain is waiting for you to report back what you've done. So then you know, like, oh, okay, I've got to go back to the top of the mountain, like the cabin that I came from, and go report on that, and then she'll presumably tell me what to do next. Which is cool. Like, I personally prefer a bit more hand-holding in my video games. I like map markers and fast travel and stuff. This game does not have any of that. It doesn't have a journal where you can, like, check your quest. You really do just, if you forget what you're doing, you have to go and talk to someone. The lack of fast travel isn't a huge deal breaker, but for that bit that I just mentioned, where like I got back to the village and I was told to go back to the cabin, that just entailed of me sheathing my weapons so I would move faster, and then sprinting past everything to go all the way back up to the top of the mountain, to the cabin, talking to that person, and then sheathing my weapons and sprinting back down the mountain to the village. And so the lack of fast travel didn't enhance my gameplay in this case. It was just kind of tedious having to sprint past everything up and down the mountain, when I theoretically could have fast traveled to the cabin and then back to the village. Probably does go against the spirit of this old school style game, but I mean, you know, Morrowind had fast travel. But anyway, apart from that little bit, I never found the lack of fast travel to be too bad. Near the end of the first dungeon, sort of, the one that you found from going north from the central village, you fight a skeleton who drops his, or their, I guess, 'cause it's a skeleton, who knows, their shield and sword. And so you can actually pick those up, and you can upgrade from your wok and machete to an actual, I think it's like a rusty sword and a shield. So presumably you can also upgrade your equipment later on in the game, but you only get it from at certain set points. You know, like that skeleton was always going to give me the upgraded sword and shield. Like, I wasn't able to find that anywhere else. And that, like, slightly disappointed me. Like, if I play something like Morrowind or Skyrim, I like poking around and finding, you know, treasure chests hidden away, or, you know, like a hollowed out tree stump with some treasure in it, and finding new equipment and things like that. I love doing that in Elden Ring. Obviously quite a different game, but that's one of my favorite things to do in Elden Ring, is to, at least when it first came out, was to poke around everywhere and find new treasure. And this game doesn't really have much point in exploring. Like, all you're gonna find is maybe a basket with a heart to heal you, and that's about it. So I very quickly realized, oh yeah, I can just kind of beeline from point A to point B, because I'm not gonna find new equipment or anything like that. I'm just gonna maybe find some arrows. It's got a very cool puzzle/notebook system. Basically, you can sometimes find these rocks covering entranceways, and they obviously look like they're doors, but you can't physically open them. And the rocks have 3 empty spaces on them, and you have a piece of chalk with you, and you basically have to, or your character has to draw in the right symbols, because you're learning these symbols from the ancient language of wherever you are. And so the way you find the codes to unlock these doors is you have to explore and find where they're written down, because they'll be written down somewhere, just like on a tablet lying around in the world. And what you can do when you find the code somewhere is you can press escape, and you can go to the notebook option, and you've got 6 slots in your notebook. So you can literally, like, write out what the code will be for the door you're looking for. And then when you go back to the door, you don't have to have memorized this code in your head the whole time. When you get back to the door, you pull open your notebook, or you go to the door, and it shows what you've got in your notebook. So you're like, oh yeah, it's this one, this one, this one. Bam, door's opened. I thought that was a really cool system. That's, I guess, kind of surprisingly modern for a throwback game, but definitely with a bit of an old school twist, I think. I did want to say it's a little bit disappointing that the game is locked at 60 FPS. The graphics are obviously quite simplistic, you know, not many polygons in most of the models here. The textures aren't super high res, so this would easily run at 180 FPS on my machine, and so it definitely felt a little bit disappointing to be stuck at 60 FPS. Again, that'll be fine for this video because it'll be 60 FPS anyway, but especially a first-person game, I would have liked it a bit more if it could have gone up to 180 FPS, but it only had the option for 30 or 60 FPS. So I think when I stopped playing, I was about 3/4 of the way through the second area. In the second area, you had to... there was this locked building, and the building had 4 statues outside of it, and those basically corresponded to 4 different bosses in the area. And I was able to find 3 bosses okay, and then I just could not actually figure out where the 4th boss could be, and all the paths that I thought might have opened from killing 3 of the 4 bosses and maybe lead to the 4th boss didn't. And I figured 2.3 hours, I'd probably played enough to do my video. I was hoping to kind of finish off that second area, fight the 4th boss, but yeah, I just wasn't able to find it. All the bosses look pretty cool. They're definitely done in the style of the game. They all look kind of simplistic, but also quite disturbing. And yeah, the combat is fairly simple. It's, you know, kind of like the Skyrim style, a bit more dynamic than Skyrim at least, and the store page even says, describes it as simple but dynamic combat, and I would say that sums it up pretty well. You've got stamina, you gotta manage your health. So if a real throwback game like Morrowind, but more linear, sounds good to you, honestly, $12.99 is a kind of a steal for this game, I think. I can't weigh in on this, but a lot of the reviews, or quite a few of the reviews, said like, oh, you know, it looked like Morrowind, found it to be a bit more like Ocarina of Time. That's a game I don't have that much experience with, so I can't comment on that at all, but if something like Morrowind and Ocarina of Time, but more linear, sounds good to you, and you don't mind a bit of a throwback game, you might enjoy Goldenheart. Thank you guys very much for watching. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!